All right, well, welcome to the cottage. You're in a session entitled Straight Talk with Young African Leaders. The session's about net neutrality and innovation in Africa. If that's not the session you meant to be in, now would be a good time to get up and leave. But if that feels a little bit awkward, you're also welcome to stay. And, we'll look forward to having you. So by way of introduction, my name is Matt Vanderwerf. I work for a nonprofit organization called IREX. We manage projects around the world, some funded by the US government, some funded by other donors that are focused on improving education, supporting independent media, and also improving local institutions that can promote just, prosperous, and inclusive societies. One of the programs that we run is called the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders. And it's the flagship program of President Obama's Young African Leaders Initiative. This program was launched in 2010 to support young African leaders as they spur growth and prosperity, strengthen democratic governance, and enhance peace and security across Africa. And today we're really lucky to have 3 of them with us, and then we're also joined by 1 additional panelist as well. So as I mentioned, this panel is meant to talk about net neutrality in Africa. And to start out, just to bring some energy here, I want to start with a pop quiz, okay? So about 2 weeks ago, there was a minister of ICT from a certain country in Africa who said net neutrality is a first world problem. So I'm looking, does anybody know who said that or what country it came from? Help give your panelists a little bit sense of what you kind of know about neutrality. Okay. No guesses? Any panelists want to answer? Yeah, this is the Minister of ICT in Kenya. So said that net neutrality is a first world problem, and it's primarily a concern of people who are already online. So you'll probably hear some ideas that suggest something a little bit different today, but we wanted to start out with that quick question. So some housekeeping rules. The way that this panel is going to work is that I'll start out with a little bit of a framing discussion, and then we'll jump into questions with the panelists. We'll make sure to reserve time at the end for audience questions as well, which I'll probably moderate myself. So if you have a specific question along the way, just hang on to it. We'll make sure that there's enough time at the end. So let's start with introductions. So immediately to my right here, we have Chenai Chair. Chenai, I'm going to flip over my notes here. Chenai is a researcher at Research ICT Africa. Her areas of research include prepaid mobile pricing, assessment in 48 African countries, internet governance, and gender and ICT access and use issues. Next to Chenai, we have Munyaradzi Dodo from Zimbabwe. Munya has spent the last 9 years working as a television director and producer in the broadcasting industry. In 2013, he started tvyangu.com, which is Zimbabwe's award-winning video on demand and content aggregator. Next, we have Sherry Tumusiime. She's an entrepreneur from Uganda, and she's the founder of babystoreug.com, which is the first specialty retail e-commerce website for baby products and apparel in Uganda. In addition, she's currently the CEO of Zimba Group Limited, which is an ad tech company providing technical and software solutions for SMEs. And then finally, we have Raindolf, who's from Ghana. He's a software engineer and IT entrepreneur, and he's the founder of and CEO of Oasis WebSoft, which is a software development house that provides IT solutions and technologies that aim to solve Africa's problems using frugal innovations. Did I get that right? Awesome. All right, so I want to start out with a question for the entire panel. So there's this conversation that net neutrality is either something that promotes innovation or something that hinders it. And I want to get your initial response. Tell us what you think about that question. Let's start with Raindolf.
So firstly, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd want to thank IREX for bringing us to the United States. So net neutrality, that's a very interesting topic, and I believe it promotes, it gives people a lot of access to technology, because there are so many people who, because of affordability, they do not have access to the internet. And net neutrality as a sense, is giving people a lot of access to internet. When you look at zero ratings, for instance, people are getting access to Facebook. So I believe achieving net neutrality in Africa is something very positive. Yeah.
Thanks. Sherry?
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. My thoughts about net neutrality, I think it promotes innovation. As he said, it promotes access to people and it lowers the costs of customer acquisition in a way. When you have more people online, you have more people, because physically accessing customers for any sort of startup, tech, education, whatever, the highest cost is customer acquisition, and net neutrality kind of evens out that playing field for most players. Yeah.
Munya?
Okay, so I'm from Zimbabwe. Just to answer the question, just to give context to where I'm coming from, Zimbabwe is a third world country. We've got a population of about 12 million. It's got a 92% mobile penetration rate and 50% internet penetration rate. But of that, the majority of infrastructure and mobile services that are provided are provided by private companies. The largest ISP in Africa is from Zimbabwe. It's called Liquid Telecoms, and it's been responsible for placing the largest fiber backbone across Africa from Zimbabwe right up to DRC. So the investment that they're putting in is something that government has had no role to play in. So with that in mind, yes, net neutrality does even out the playing field, but we are assuming that the internet is neutral to begin with, which I believe it's not, because from our standpoint, or from my personal standpoint, Africa contributes less than 3% of the content that's on the internet. So when we're saying, does it promote innovation, we're actually, I think, in a way, we're trying to advocate for like this whole notion of a global village, and which is contrary to what most Africans or most innovators believe. Because once you advocate for the whole global village, then you're saying, who owns the village? Who's controlling the village? Whose village is it? Why are we having that kind of village in the first place? And what happens to our village when your village becomes the most popular village in the whole community? So in a way, I think it does solve one problem, but it also creates new problems.
Yeah. Great, and thanks for bringing up the content question. I hope that we're going to be able to focus on that. Chenai?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be among young.
Great, yeah. Thank you.
Great, so I can start again. Thank you for having me, IREX. It's an honor to be here with young African leaders. So for me, personally, and for in my research that I've done, net neutrality does promote innovation, because the assumption is you've got an equal playing field, equal access to resources, so everyone can have an idea and innovate. With that assumption in mind, but we have to understand that it's taking place within an ICT ecosystem. And there are other factors at play that might just hinder innovation, for example, policies in place by those governments or competition practices. And in terms of whether it helps more people benefit from the internet, I think I completely agree with what Munya was saying in the instance that you are playing on an assumption, and that I think it's only beneficial if what is actually being innovated around is relevant. So you cannot then say you've got net neutrality and then everyone can innovate around a new Lyft service like Uber, but then most of the people actually don't have access to the banking system. Most of the people actually prefer to use public transport because it's cheaper. So I think we have to bear in mind the context in which this innovation is carrying place and whether it's actually relevant for most of the people in Africa who are accessing mobile via the internet. Our organization has done research on this, as well as whether the actual content that is being innovated around is relevant. And if the research has been done to see whether the actual market, is that what you're saying, that innovators then gain access to that market, but that market that you're tapping into, is it just a high-end market, or is it people at the bottom of the pyramid?
Thank I'm going to take a seat, and I want to go back to something, Sherry, that you mentioned earlier, which is that net neutrality is important for ensuring that there are more customers and that more people have access. And one of the things that we've seen over the last 15 years is there's been this just explosion in access, really globally. So in the last 15 years, we've gone from 700 million mobile phone subscribers to over 7 billion today. We have something like 97% penetration. We've gone from 6% internet penetration to something close to 45% internet penetration. But at the same time, we're seeing a bit of a slowdown in the growth of those numbers today. As a lot of the sort of low-hanging fruit has already been picked by the telecoms. And getting to the next billion and then the next billion after that is going to take some really big investments in infrastructure. And a lot of the telecoms are finding that that's not always cost effective. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about whether or not you see a connection between net neutrality and bringing sort of the next billion users online as well. And how do those things sort of interplay with one another?
Okay. Given the context of where I'm from Uganda, it's just a conversation that we're just starting to have, because we essentially at the moment are just talking about access. We have 11 million users of the internet at the moment from a population of 40 million. So there are some gains there, but then you're talking about the next 11 billion. Those are not hindered by things that net neutrality can solve in any way. It's infrastructure issues. We have high levels of poverty. So those are, it's structure, systematic problems that you cannot innovate around. You cannot sit in a room and say, oh, we have to have an even playing room filled on the internet to bring these people online. No. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for that. You want to answer as well?
No, I just wanted to jump in there and highlight a comment that one of my friends said when I told them that I'm going to be on this panel. They were like, that's an ivory tower conversation, and I'm just trying to get clean water to my house, and you're talking about net neutrality. I mean, that's like far-fetched.
Sounds like a minister of ICT in Kenya as well. Yeah.
Yes, so I want to add up to what she's saying. So Ghana, for instance, we have about 30 million people, and out of the 30 million, they just released recent statistics. Just 5 million people are connected. So this is, first off, if you're an innovator and you want to build something, your market is incredibly low. Out of 30 million people, you're just looking at 5 million people. So I think the bigger picture here is we are all looking at connecting more people, giving access to a lot of people. And, net neutrality in this context, again, would be like a child who is hungry and you've brought the child bread and somebody else is saying, don't give the child bread. It has to be balanced diet.
I think this is exactly what the Kenyan Minister of ICT's comment was. Well.
Yes, okay. Yes. So it's also very important that this conversation is also important because you look at different sectors. People are trying to build, let's say, YouTube type of services. Right. Imagine if YouTube enters into partnership with an ISP saying, make our site must, or they kind of install a cache where watching video from a certain country is going to be easily accessible. It means it's going to kill whoever, any startup or company in that country who is building a similar service. So net neutrality is also very important if you want to promote local content. I think you're going to talk about that a bit later.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to ask a question for you, Chenai. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing at the regional level in terms of initiatives from governments around net neutrality? Sort of where is the conversation at this point, and what are you seeing amongst different countries?
Okay, so I can actually say that the conversation is similar to what the Kenyan minister has said, where it's an ivory tower problem, it's a first world problem, and I attended the African Internet Governance Forum last year in Ethiopia, and the head of the Southern African Regulators Association literally said, do you want us to have an open playing field where we need to prioritize emergency services over a snail, an email? So it's a matter of, for that picture that I got, it's in Africa, net neutrality seems to be something that's being forced down after the FCC ruling. So it's like the debate has opened up, but is it really a relevant debate? Because it seems like everywhere that you go at every international meeting, it's like, so what's Africa's position? And Africa's position has been split up depending on where you're coming from. Are you an innovator? Are you a user? Are you government? And if if you're government, what are you trying to gain? Are you trying to protect your industry? Or recently in South Africa, what we had was the mobile network operators campaigning for services like WhatsApp and Facebook to be banned on the grounds of net neutrality. And the regulator came back and said to them, you are only crying because you don't want to grow up. So it's a matter of that the net neutrality debate is being used by some to further an agenda, but at the same time, it's not really a priority for African governments.
Good, thank you. Munya.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. Our Minister of ICT, Superman Wanzira, the collective ISPs came to him and approached him with a proposal to block WhatsApp, Skype, or to find a way to tax WhatsApp or Skype. And he threw the proposal out, and instead of that, he actually instituted a tax regime for the ISPs to say, okay, out of the profits that you guys are making, we're going to take a certain percentage and allocate that to the startups so that we promote innovation. So he essentially just said, innovate your way out of this this problem, and don't try and use regulation to stop market forces from happening. So he basically, what's happening is they're saying, okay, we're at a stage in our democracy or in our country's future where we are just beginning to accept the whole notion of capitalism, open market, open society. So, and now you're almost trying to bring a socialist agenda on a capitalist movement. So that's the position we're in right now. So let the market forces just play out, and if you crumble, it means that something will be built on the ruins of your previous business.
Okay, thank you. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the challenges specifically facing entrepreneurs and those are trying to innovate. And so I want to ask this question for you, Raindolf, and then also Munya and Sherry as well. What are some of the challenges that you experience as startups, and how can telecoms and ISPs help to address some of the problems that you're facing, especially as they relate to the net neutrality conversation? And Raindolf, let's start with you.
I believe the number one problem most of the startup face in my part of the world, Ghana or most parts of Africa, is funding. To lift a project off the ground, you need certain structures in place. Maybe you might need an office space, you might need good talent to work with, because you can't do everything on your own as an entrepreneur. So I believe the number one problem you're facing is funding. And the other problems are more bigger than just you start to, like, let's say we have power rationing in Ghana, where certain parts of the city get electricity from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and the other parts does not get power from 6 p.m. to the next morning. Mm-hmm. So imagine you're working in an environment like this. It means you need fuel to fuel your generator. So these are problems that the government needs to step up. And the telecommunications, they are not doing much for startups in my country, for instance. All they get to do is organize app competitions. And the country is 20 million, just 5 million people are connected. So when you're organizing an app competition, who are you doing a service to? You're not doing anybody service. Technology and entrepreneurship, they move hand in hand, but entrepreneurship is bigger than that. Some of us are looking at other areas. You take, for instance, we have a healthcare service where you're using a mobile app to talk to doctors. People are using mobile USSD. That's more of like a low-end technology to give agriculture information to farmers. These are very important areas that telcos need to look at, where I guess we'll get to zero rating. But for now, we don't have any local application or service that is being zero rated. The only services that are zero rated are services from abroad, like Google and WhatsApp and and the others. And that is very detrimental if you're in the local space, because this should be cheaper for people in the country. So I believe a telco should be looking at working hand in hand with local startups, because they make a lot of money. And startups, we all work hand in hand. You are like a bigger company, would need to interface or integrate whatever work we are doing with you. So I believe that's the challenge. And the last one, our chipping, is very important. Getting the right access to expertise. I'm here today because I got access to very good mentors I spoke to. I had experts to talk to if I needed business management skills or something. And I believe there are people who also need access to the right mentors, whether in the country or outside the country. So I believe, that's those are the challenges, and I found a way to give the solutions to them.
Okay, thank you, Sherry.
Well, I'll begin with the biggest challenges that we face. Those are infrastructure challenges, power, like he said, roads, network, and those can only be solved by policy, by having better governments, better institutions, better structures. Then we can begin to say, okay, we can now innovate. You have constant power now. People have access to internet, things like that. But then on another level, where the telecoms can come in, I feel that telecoms take more from us than they give. They're not giving back. For example, let me give an example of MTN. MTN is a part of the African Internet Group, which funds the Rocket Group of companies. And they have these startups. Okay, they're not even startups anymore. They're corporate companies like Hello Food, Kmo, Jumia. And all these services come already installed for devices that are sold by MTN. They are 0 rated, so you can't compete. My small e-commerce company cannot compete with something that's already, first of all, it's on the device, then it's 0 rated. My costs of customer acquisition are higher than what is actually a corporate. So the landscape is skewed completely in that light. So that's also a challenge that we face. Then, of course, there's sensitization of the customers. Some of the things that we're trying to bring are still very new. You're innovating a service to ease, let's say, purchase of goods and things like that, Uber. But then you're innovating for a population that's still 80% of the people are poor. So you're bringing Uber. It doesn't make sense. You're bringing e-commerce. I can't afford food. What the hell would I be doing ordering an Uber? Things like that. So so there's also that. So yeah, we try to innovate and think about, okay, what are the services that the bottom of the pyramid can access to, things that are subsidized, things around education and health, like he's doing with the Visa app. So those are the kind of thoughts that we are having, to have things to solve these problems. But then it becomes a labor of love, because you're not going to be paid for these things. You're going to provide access to information, but no one is going to afford to pay for this access. So and then it comes to then funding. I'm doing this for free. The people I'm doing it for can't pay for it, so that means I need to get funding to do it. So it's a whole cycle of problems.
Okay, Munya.
Okay, I think for us it's very similar to what's happening in Ghana and Uganda. But the first problem in our context is that we have a generational gap between our leaders and the young startups that are coming through. So you have a leadership that's not in tune with the technological advances that are happening around the world. So they don't have a technical understanding of what's happening around the world, and then that comes down to a policy level where the policies that are in place are now so outdated that they are irrelevant to the current context. Just for example, in Zimbabwe, you are required to have a broadcasting license. Like I run an online TV channel, but under the current law, I'm required to have a broadcasting license. And even to the point where someone who has a YouTube channel can be required to have a broadcasting license, because you fall under that law. Just covers everything in general. But it's a law that was put in place at the beginning of internet coming into Zimbabwe. So, and it's still in place right now. So some of the laws that are in place don't cover the technology that's there now. So now you're caught in between a rock and a very hard place, because now on one hand you have policies that don't support innovation or that don't promote innovation. And on the other hand, you have ISPs who are taking advantage of the discrepancy, because partly, well, in my case, the ISP's licenses that they get at the beginning of like every 10 years covers the whole licensing issue. So if you're an ISP, or it encompasses a broadcasting license and everything in there, so they can take advantage of the fact that that they're covered by the current law and come into a situation where they provide these multiplex services. So you have an ISP which provides you with internet, which owns a video on demand platform, which owns a media studio. So you can't really compete with them at that level. So you're, on one hand, the policy doesn't support you. On the other, you have an ISP who started out as a hero, if I can quote Batman, started out as a hero, but lived long enough to see themselves becoming a villain. So yeah, that's where we are.
I also just jump
Yeah,
in?
go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not a innovator, but I am speaking from a demand side
You're
perspective.
very innovative.
So I'm going to speak from a demand side perspective, especially when Sherry mentioned about bottom of the pyramid, as well as platform issues where phones come preloaded. So we did a research on the mobile app ecosystem in South Africa, especially developing apps for the bottom of the pyramid. And what we actually found was that one of the major challenges was that sometimes innovators were building for apps like Android or for Apple specifically, instead of developing for OS agnostic kind of services. So there you've already got a challenge that you are losing, like what you're saying, about 80% of the population that doesn't have an Android operating system. But in the case of South Africa now, most people are getting very cheap phones on the Android operating system. And then secondly, you've got issues around where the actual way in which people get to access the services, what are the barriers to using your application, the applications that are innovated around? Do they have to do a subscription? How do they pay for these applications? What's the cost? And at the end of the day, you don't want to just do something for the labor of love. You also need to eat. So I think the demand side perspective is around the innovations that are out there, like how do people access them? What is the need? And I think sometimes, often you can find that innovators don't look at the research that's already done around what are the issues around access and use. And for example, well, I know, for example, in Cape Town, there actually is the MLab, the Mobile Application Lab, and they work extensively with people from low-income areas who are running small businesses and develop for that sector, but they've got good funding. So that's the thing, they've got good funding, so they can be a sustainable model. But really the barrier is especially around getting it to the users. And what we found was that most people will use an application if someone says it's good. So Mixit, for example, was such a smash hit because every university student had it. So Mixit was a social media platform was a chat platform way before WhatsApp. And then WhatsApp came into the market and killed it. But in essence, a lot of people, and it was an OS agnostic form, anyone could download it, and governments rode on that wave. There were many educational platforms involved in it, so basically there was also subsidization coming in from the government. And it was also, I think it also had ads, but then that was dependent on how you subscribe to it. So in essence, I think the demand side issue really is how do we get users to use local apps? I think it's a critical barrier and it's a critical question that needs to be answered.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have this story that I like telling about my startup, my baby store. When we started out customer acquisition, for everyone that we delivered to, we installed the app and made the website the homepage. So so they wouldn't notice. They'll be like, oh, I have this. Okay.
Okay.
So imagine doing that physically, and that's not a sustainable model.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. So we've touched on zero rating a little bit, and I know that at least within the U.S. here, this is a conversation that's come up, obviously, with the Facebook Basics case in India. That's something that's been in the press a lot. But there's also what I like to call sort of the mushy middle of not necessarily zero rating services, but maybe telecoms that will offer special bundles or discounted data for certain types of applications or certain types of data use. And Chenai, I wanted to ask if you could just sort of share with us a little bit about what the categories of data use or data purchasing opportunities look like, and sort of explain a little bit about what everything from from open data that's completely neutral and you can do whatever you want with it to zero-rated data. Can you just give us a sense of what the categories are?
Okay, so on the markets, what we started off with is we started looking at 1 gigabyte prepaid mobile bundles, which we saw that a lot of African operators were offering, and we developed an index around that. But in the last couple of years, we've noticed a trend where in order to innovate against over-the-top services, operators are now offering social media service-specific bundles. So you've got Facebook-only bundles, which are relatively cheaper than the 1 gig data, which you either give you unlimited Facebook for the day, and I mean the whole Facebook, not just the text service, or WhatsApp bundles, for example. I am on a, with my local service provider, I'm on a WhatsApp bundle where I pay about 5 cents, and I get 2 gigs of WhatsApp for the month, but minus voice calling. I think they're still adjusting to that. And then you've also got, so those are the service-specific bundles. Then you've got options where people watch a video and then they get free data after watching that video. And
it's like a reward.
Yeah. So basically it's a reward, or you sign up and then you get free data. And then, but predominantly what we've seen is either the zero rating apps, and then these actually have a shelf life. So it's either for a year or for 3 months. So in South Africa, we've got the zero-rated Facebook and the zero-rated WhatsApp from one service provider. Then we've actually got music Deezer. It's actually not African. It's from somewhere else, but its presence is in a lot of African countries actually. And then we've also got service video streaming services. So then you've got those platforms where then you are given new bundles around to watch a specific program. So what we do find in the market, in summary, is actually you've got service-specific models, open data plans ranging from 50 megabytes to 10 gigs. Then you've got these service-specific models, and then you've got zero rating, and then you've also got video streaming services bundles that are offered.
Anything you guys want to add? So I want to ask this question, and it's a fairly direct question, but when we look at zero rating services, or when we look at these sort of bundled services, are we creating 2 different internets for the people who are coming online? Randolph.
Yeah, thank you again for the question. Zero-rated services, let me just give you an example of somebody who has not been introduced to the internet. This is the first time you buy a mobile phone and you're introduced to Facebook, right? And this is Facebook free basics. First thing, you're going to find videos there. You're going to find streamed version of images and text. And there's a danger here. The danger here is, in your mind, you're finding everything you need on the internet on there. So you're going to think Facebook is the internet. Whilst the internet on its own is a vast, gigantic information system with petabytes of data that you can find information, all the things you need. So first off, I'd say zero ratings is creating 2 different services. That it shouldn't be like that. Anybody who has access to the internet should be given the freedom to find what they need on the internet. Zero-rated services are creating 2 different internet. That is very dangerous, as I've mentioned earlier on. And at the same time, the zero-rated services is just like a startup that has just launched an application. This is another example I'm giving you. They start with a freemium version, and over time, you get to pay for a premium version once they know everybody is hooked to the service. So you create a business page, for instance, and then I'm using a social network, maybe Facebook specific or a different social network. Once you create a page, before you let people see your content, you have to pay for it, because they've created some sort of algorithm to make sure not everybody sees whatever you put on there unless you pay for it. This is somebody who is in a village in the eastern region in my country who has started a small shop and wants people to know about it. You first giving the person something free, and now you want the person to pay more for it. So I believe zero-rated services, if it's going to be all-inclusive with local software, local applications, then it's a good thing. But once it's just a one-way thing to just like companies outside coming from the West, it becomes very dangerous for somebody who doesn't know the internet and would feel one particular service is the internet, it's going to limit it's not going to give them room to innovate. It's not going to give them room to think. It's not going to give them room to find information. And information is a very powerful thing. So I believe zero-rated service is going to be a good thing if it's all inclusive, where local applications are also giving a chance to be zero-rated. But if it's just one particular service, then we are doing a disservice to anybody who is new to the internet.
Anybody want to agree or disagree? Okay. There you go. Trade.
We have my WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook bundles that people subscribe to that are really, really cheap. So the danger with this is that, like he said, you have two sections of the internet. You have an elite group of people who know what the internet is. We are starting to see increasingly, when they did the national survey recently, people would go and they would ask them and they say, yes, I use the internet, but what's your email? No, I don't have an email, but I have a Facebook account. And there were so many people like that who they have Facebook accounts, but they don't know, aside from Facebook, what's there, that they end at Facebook. And that's dangerous because you have this massive group of people who just think that they have Facebook and that's where it ends. So you have people who have a limited world view. They are not exposed to other things that perhaps they could use the internet for. So that's dangerous, but I do not know how we are going to resolve around that, because and for some reason, it's not even working for the telecoms, because now you have all these apps and all these services that are zero rated eating into their revenues for data, for voice, for SMS. So I really do not understand even their end game around this.
Yeah.
So it's been, it seems to be beneficial to only these the big blue, Facebook and Twitter and who else.
Yeah, well, I agree with them completely, but also to an extent I disagree, because I think the internet is evolving. I mean, and this is part of the evolution of the internet. I remember there was a time when all I had was an email address. Like that's all I needed. I didn't know, but I grew from having an email address to having a blog, to having a website, and you know you get exposed as you become more aware, as you get more information, you build up to that. And I think for a community that is coming from zero internet, you know, having free basics or a zero rated service is the first level. As long as it remains just level one, and then there's a second level, and then there's a progression in terms of, you know, being aware of other services. I have a problem with it just being like a permanent solution, but I have no problems with it being a first step to an overarching solution. So, for example, I'll give a practical example of my startup. My startup is called TV Yangu. It's a video on demand platform. But how we started it is, in Zimbabwe, Twitter is free. It's zero rated on one of the platforms. But what happened was Zimbabweans on Twitter requested the ISP to zero rate Twitter, because there are like 200,000 Zimbabweans who are on Twitter. And so they actually started a campaign on Twitter, free Twitter, hashtag free Twitter in Zimbabwe. And then they were like...
And it worked?
It worked. It worked. They zero rated it for a month, and then they tried it, and then they canceled it. And then there was a huge movement. So right now I use free Twitter. So it was on a zero rated platform that I started TV Young. So I created a Twitter account, and I started following all the content creators in Zimbabwe and across Africa. And I would just retweet their content. And we grew our Twitter handle. And then we moved from having a Twitter handle to having a Facebook page where we would upload the video content. The Facebook page was zero rated as well. And then we moved from having a Twitter account and a Facebook account to having a website where the content would be. So in essence, like, it was baby steps, but we did not stay at the zero rated platform. We grew from there. So I don't mind these zero rated platforms existing as long as we don't make it a permanent solution.
So I want to put you on this a little bit, because this is very much like the ideal example of what could happen. But at the same time, Sherry referenced some research earlier. I think the first example of this came out of Indonesia, where some researchers saw that there was, I think, 11% of the population that said, that they had never used the internet, but that they used Facebook. And at first they thought this was sort of a glitch in the research, but then they went back and looked at it. What they found is that there's this huge perceptions issue where the population was actually using, that percentage of the population was actually using Facebook and didn't realize that they were using the internet. I think your group has done some similar research in Africa on this as well. And I guess the question here is, how do the baby steps happen for that population? Those who are sort of coming online and they may be experiencing the internet primarily through these very mediated forms of Facebook or something else. How do they actually move to understanding and being able to take full advantage of the internet outside of that sort of track?
Yeah, well, let me answer that. I think, like I said, it's an evolution of sorts that the ecosystem goes through by itself. For example, in Zimbabwe, actually, WhatsApp is the biggest carrier, or is the biggest app. 34% of all the data on online data is given to WhatsApp, is for people WhatsApping, sending videos. So that's the first point of entry. That's all I'm saying. It's the first point of entry. Once they've entered, they start to discover self-discovery of what else is there. You get links, you get videos sent to you with URLs. I'll give you an example of one of the biggest show in, like, a video show in Zimbabwe. It's called P.O. Box, and it starts off. They make 2-minute videos every week, and then they send them out on a WhatsApp broadcast list. And then it goes viral, and then it ends up on Facebook, and then it goes onto YouTube, and people share that. And people in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in the UK, they get that. And then the content starts to become viral, but they've moved on from just being on WhatsApp to learning more about other platforms. They've learned that, you can put it on Facebook and promote the video. They've learned that you can put it on YouTube, you can put it on Vimeo. And it's grown from just being sending one video to being something else. And it's become the biggest show in a country which has one national television channel. So you find that's them innovating their way out. And I think we shouldn't prescribe the steps to innovation or the steps to which people get access to internet. We should take the principle that we're trying to advocate for and let it be. Just leave it alone and let the ecosystem evolve on its own, because the environmental factors, like in America and UK, are different from the ones in Africa. So let the ecosystem in Africa, or in particular regions, or in Zimbabwe, just evolve according to its own circumstances.
No, I disagree. Yeah, unless maybe it's Zimbabwe specific, for it to evolve on its own, I don't see how that is even going to happen if you're just offered just one choice. I believe people should be giving options. It shouldn't just be one choice and you are magically going to believe it's going to evolve. It can't evolve on its own. If somebody's looking for, let's say, there's this massive open online courses that are training and teaching a lot of people things in my country and different parts of Africa. You don't find a Khan Academy ad on Facebook. So if somebody wants to learn, how do they find this? And you magically expect they are going to evolve. It doesn't happen that way. They should be giving options. I believe if people are giving options, they would know where to find the right information. But if we are going to sit down and say, let it just evolve on its own, things just don't happen. It will take people, and people need to be well informed that this is not just one option you have. You have so many variety, and that's what the internet is for. Just make the internet free and open to everybody, and they learn what they can. But if you're saying, okay, let's just give the person one, maybe Facebook or Google, they can't evolve. It's not even fun to me in my mind on how it can evolve. I believe people should be giving options, and that's how they can learn. If you're introducing somebody to the internet, you let them know the internet is big. It's not just one particular place. There's so many things you can find on the internet. So I totally agree. It cannot evolve on its own. People should be giving options in Africa.
All right, Chenai, let it evolve or protect the user?
Been waiting to speak. Look, I think we had a session around connecting the next billion, and there is no one silver bullet. There's no way we can simply sit and let it evolve, and there's no way we can always intervene. So I think actually you guys are kind of agreeing because what you're saying is complementary to each other. The reason why people are mainly on social media is because my friend is on social media. I opened up an email account because there was this page called High Five back in the days. It was social media, and that's so I evolved from having an email account. I did not have anyone to email, but then I opened a social media site, and then from there on I got people to email. But at the same time, I think exactly, it's also about understanding context. So, for instance, in Zimbabwe, WhatsApp has become a big communicator because there's a large diaspora community. I'm a part of the diaspora community, and it was so expensive to communicate with people back home, so WhatsApp was the best option. And I think Mixer took a long time to actually take off in Zimbabwe. There were some problems around that. So that was like a natural market evolution, and they saw a market and they tapped into it. So I think these two strategies are quite complementary to actually driving up internet uptake. And the other thing is that I think we expect too much from innovators. We expect, in order to connect the next billion, we expect too much from, or we're placing so much onerous on Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp because that's what mobile operators are doing. But there's a need for educating the user, and it's not because I've got Facebook, I'm going to educate someone else. It's actually about outreach from us. I think each and every one of us here has a responsibility to actually go into the community where you actually, Daniel is not here, but he raises the example of how his mother, he bought his mother a smartphone, and she calls him constantly and says, this phone doesn't work. It's preloaded with Facebook, it's preloaded with WhatsApp, and because she doesn't understand it. And it's about the capability of the end user to ensure connectivity. If we all sit here and argue that no, the market isn't working, no, the regulation isn't working, but if the end users that are not present in this room do not know and do not have the capacity, and that's about education, that is about school curriculums. You've got teachers afraid of the internet, you've got teachers afraid of Facebook, you've got teachers afraid of WhatsApp. And I think that then just speaks to trying to change a whole social issue. So it's in connecting the next billion, we need to actually look at the different strands that affect people. And if the natural evolution is going to take place, it's going to take place because someone is communicating the language. If we're going to assist the evolution to take place, it's because we've identified the problems and we are using different strategies to actually ensure that people use local applications, people use popular applications.
Sherry, do you want to agree or disagree?
I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with him that, but then what she's saying, we have two kinds of users in Africa. We have the elite internet user, and then we have the one who is afraid of the internet. So, and then you have practices that these companies that are starting to do where, for example, a link in WhatsApp can't go to another website.